All right, YouTube, it's time for occult literature video number 18 on Emil Hartmann's work, Remedies of the Great Physician. Now, this is an early 1900s era work, and if you look back, especially in the 20s, and to a fairly good degree into the 30s, sort of punctuating with World War II, in that interwar period as well, a lot of the mystic sort of occult works that you get are really Christian works. It's sort of a branch of snake oil. It's like the alchemical receipts of earlier times, only in a slightly different form. Now, as always, link in the description to where you can get the work, my edition of this work off Amazon, second link to my books blog. Emil Hartmann's work, though, is one of the few sort of Christian mystic manuscripts from the period that I chose to release. I've read dozens of them. But most of them, they're not quite as interesting. Hartmann's work goes into specific prayers. It's very telling of the time period. Specific prayers for specific maladies in many cases. For instance, here's a special prayer for securing the Lord's blessing and healing a sick child. Here's one for liver complaints. There's one for bowel complaints. And this is very typical fare of the sort of mysticism from the time period. As I said, if you look back at alchemical receipts, these very short alchemical manuscripts from like the Renaissance into the early Enlightenment, what you get is essentially it's snake oil. That is, it's actively preached against by the core of alchemists. But the lay people, the sort of folkish side of it, they took it seriously. In the same case, you get these Christian booklets throughout time. They even make them now, that are sort of quasi-mystical in nature. That is, the idea behind them, whether it's simply, whether it's stated openly, whether it's explicit, or whether it's just sort of insinuated. The idea is that a specific form of prayer, a specific form of practice, is capable of securing some sort of blessing. We see this with the prosperity gospel all of the time. Well, you pray this prayer and tithe $10 and you'll become wealthy or something like that, or you'll become successful. You'll get the new car, you'll get the marriage or whatever. Your marriage will be successful. It's mysticism. It's superstition. But it's interesting mysticism. It's also Christian in nature. The only cosmic being called upon within this text is Jehovah, specifically the Lord, the Christian, the Protestant Lord. And Hartmann's work primarily focuses on complaints regarding disease. Now, you have to frame it in the time period, in this sort of Edwardian period, sort of the swing era into the Depression. Disease was a big problem for most people, especially for the marginally literate lower class. You go into the upper class, you don't necessarily see this problem to the greater degree. But the working class, certainly, and what existed of a middle class at the time, were constantly beset by problems. You even have this alluded to in fictional settings, like you watch Andy Griffith's show or something, and you're sort of looking back at that older period. And quite often, what's the plot revolve around? I think 3 or 4 different episodes were dedicated to the arrival of sort of snake oil salesmen, people that were kind of dishonest. They were peddling some sort of cure. In many cases, it was literally just liquor, and this was the medicine. And of course, it made people feel better. The idea was to lift people's spirits, essentially. That's what this work does. But I offer it as an addition, not so much because I believe in Christian mysticism, because I quite clearly don't, if you know, obviously. But it's still an interesting tract because it takes place in a period of time when this was sort of the average occult text that was going on. This is sort of the era of theosophy and so forth. This is not modern demonolatry or the sort of hippie era New Age movements of crystals and chakras and stuff like this. This goes back to a further time in which you still got the imperialism, you still got the race question, you've still got imperialism, you've got nationalism, you've got communism, and all these different forces. People feel socially alienated, and especially in the Americas and parts of the Western world, people were seeking more of a grounding in their religion, but they wanted to branch out into mysticism. They wanted to feel more empowered by it than simply pray to God that this war ends, pray to God that your child is healed. They wanted more of a specific prescription for a prayer that would actually get them through such a thing. But it's definitely an interesting work, so it's recommended reading, so to speak. And again, a link in the description to the Amazon page, second link as well to the books blog where you can find this and many other similar works. That's about all. Peace out.